Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 2022 PAAL Summit. And good morning to everybody. My name is Adriana Gaviria, and I am the director of technology and innovation for PAAL, and also the producer of the summit. I'm so excited that you are joining us this morning. I welcome you. We're going to start the session here in a couple seconds. Towards the end of the session, we'll have an opportunity for a Q&A. And currently right now, as you know, we are streaming and recording the session. And I'm going to pass it on to Tamania.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tamania Garza. She, her, hers, ella. I am the National PAAL Director of Community and Justice Initiatives, and I'm so excited to be a part of this panel today. But I'm going to start the space off with a land acknowledgement. I am coming to you from the land of the Lenni Lenape people, whose historical territory includes the places colonially known as Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Long Island, and the lower Hudson Valley. For more than 10,000 years, the Lenape people have been stewards of these lands, as well as the river of human beings, or the Delaware River. Over the past 250 years, many of the Lenape people were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands and dispersed throughout the country, though some families remain. These families continue the traditions of their ancestors to this day. The violence that removed the Lenape from their homeland is a powerful part of the history of Pennsylvania, and we acknowledge that in this moment and that we work and live on these very lands. This is the story of our entire country. We encourage you to learn about the lands where you live and work and the history of the people who lived there before colonization, many who still live there today, though they are often starved of the very resources they protected for so long, including access to housing, sustainable foodways, safety, clean water, and the land where they once lived with their families. This information was provided in part by www.lenape-nation.org. Though it's important to remember the history of these lands, it is also important to remember that these communities still exist. So learn about the artists, activists, families, and the ways that you can support and return resources to these communities. This should be an ongoing and active thing in your life. And if you can commit yourself to that daily, weekly, monthly, you will be able to help be part of these communities and celebrate their joys, as well as help them face their challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamania, so much. And Adriana for launching us into the summit. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rachel Spencer Hewitt. My pronouns are she, they. I am the Director of Programming, Partnerships, and Resources here at PAAL, and so grateful to be here. This is our 4th annual summit, and our commitment every year is to be kinder to ourselves in how we build it, to be quite honest. And that is not, absolutely, this is missional for us. And so the invitation for all of you as you're listening to any principles that may be helpful to you is to adopt them in a way that helps you be kinder to yourself and kinder to those around you in your practice intentionally. Just as a refresher, the theme this year is gentle work, specific care. And I have with me some incredible individuals who are leaders in their field, who exhibit compassion in their specific work, and who are also very involved and foundational to how PAAL has shaped principles to the caregiver community. So I look up to these people and I welcome them, and I would like to invite a self-introduction, and I'll throw the ball to Nicole. And Nicole, if you'd like to throw the ball for self-introduction to one of your partners here.
Oh my goodness. Good morning. Good morning, Rachel. It's been far too long since I've had the chance to just be with you. So I'm very grateful for the invitation to engage. Oof, I want to name myself this morning in a very kind way as saying, like, I'm Christmas decorating last night tired. I kind of noticed when I turned the video on, you can see these motherfucking elves in the shell that I had to remember to move last night for the first time. So that's who's hanging out behind there. I name myself as a community-held single mother, and just wanting to always, for myself, reshape the narrative that I should be able to do it all by myself. That narrative was literally killing me when I first became a parent. And so I'm so grateful for the people who allow me to walk my path, to stay on my path, to deepen my path, while also helping my kids to find what their path is. And that kind of motherhood, that type of caregiving looks very different than my mother, who sacrificed so much in order for me and my brother to have the incredible lives that we had. So putting myself in the space in that way this morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Akema, I want to call you into the space.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that reframing, that language. I needed that. So thank you for that. Good morning to everyone. I am Akema A. Brown. Nicole, you set the bar. I am the mother and caretaker of two incredible people. And that shapes a lot and informs a lot of who I am and how I am on the day-to-day. And also especially centering this necessity for gentle care and gentle work and specific care. I am a filmmaker by trade, and so I'm a screenwriter and film producer. And because of the very need for space in my industry, I have helped to create a nonprofit organization called Real Families for Change. And that organization, very much like PAAL in the theater space, is committed to centering care for working families in the screen industry. And so I'm very excited to be here, very happy to talk about this and just to explore this with this incredible panel of people. And so with that, Tamanya, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nicole and Akema and Rachel and Adriana for being here. My name is Tamanya Garza. As I said, I work with PAAL National. I'm also the Chief Representative for Philadelphia. And who I am is I'm a director and producer by trade in the theater industry. And like everyone has said today, I have a little one at home who is, by the way, quite sick today. So if I suddenly disappear, it is to care for them. They go by Spider-Man in most spaces. So if Spider-Man needs a little help this morning, I will be there. I will be swinging in. So yes, just as both have sort of suggested, both of you, that shapes everything about my day, everything about how I want to work, everything about the spaces I seek out and the conversations I want to have. And it gives me such great joy to be in this room with these beautiful minds who, as Rachel said, have modeled compassion, have modeled education, have modeled building the space I think we all dreamt about when we were younger, and that holds us as whole people and makes space for us as whole people. And as you said, teaches us that we don't have to do it by ourselves. There is a community out there, and so many of us feel isolated, and we don't need to. So so just coming into that gently and with the specific ask that everyone here just like again can extend themselves that grace wherever you are, however you are, you showed up, you made it here, and we are so thankful for you. I'm going to pass it over to Adriana.
Thank you so much, Tamanya. Yes, my name is Adriana Gaviria. Like I mentioned before, my pronouns are she, her, ella. And aside from being the Director of Technology and Innovation for PAAL, I'm also a performer, I'm a voiceover artist, a producer. I work with the Soul Project. I work with the Latinx Theater Commons. And I love working with PAAL and being part of these conversations. It's a space where I feel warm and welcomed all the time. And I'm so excited to launch another summit for PAAL. I think this is amazing. It makes me so happy for everyone who's joining us today and throughout the summit this week. Rachel?
Yes, thank you. I want to ingest what this introduction was, and for everyone listening on the call, if I can offer our first prompt, actually. For these folks, so much of the mentorship and the influence that they have, I feel I heard, and we all could potentially have heard, even in how they name themselves. And that's the first prompt I would love to offer the room as we're all listening to these introductions. If we can ask ourselves today, how do I name myself in spaces? When you introduce yourself, do you introduce yourself with your name and title? Do you introduce yourself as I'm so-and-so's mom? Do you introduce yourself as I have accomplished X? And there's nothing wrong with any of those, but every single panelist allowed space for them to identify their state of being, for them to identify their relationship, for them to identify their dreams. And so I invite all of you, as we move to the next prompt, to allow yourselves to consider how you name yourself. And with that, I would love to throw the ball into this space to ask about compassionate leadership. And some of this was inspired by a conversation I had with Nicole Brewer years ago. It's okay, you don't have to remember anything, I remember it. Years ago, when I was doing interviews for the PAAL handbook. And it was before I even knew Nicole was a mother. I just knew Nicole was a voice I needed to hear and talk to. And when I asked about mothering and parenting in this space, one of the things, Nicole, you shared with me is that as a director, when someone comes in late, the first thing you say to them is welcome. And it was profound to my perfectionist, very fearful of making mistakes ear, that had been conditioned that way, not naturally that way. And so the prompt is, what in your life, either that someone else has given you or that you're ruminating on now, what is a word or a phrase that allows you to lead with grace in your spaces? And I know, Akima, yesterday you mentioned one in the motherhood space, but in terms of compassionate leadership, the language that we speak into the people and the rooms that we're responsible for has such an impact. And so I'd love to offer that prompt. And Nicole, maybe we can start with you unpacking that if that feels interesting to you, or feel free to pivot.
It does. And I think I do. I have pretty shitty memory. But I do think I remember that conversation because I believe I was parked outside of my kid's school talking to you. I was super excited to have that conversation. So I will say this, when I think about the spaces that I'm able to lead or I'm able to be a part of, and so therefore help to influence or shape, I'm always thinking about the space beforehand, right? So it is that dream time that happens about the space before I'm in the space that dictates how I intentionally focus my resource and capacity, whatever it might be, because it's never 100%, to shape the space in a way that makes people feel at an embodied level, not on an intellectual one, that they are welcome. They are welcome in that space, however they are showing up that day. And I think particularly, Rachel, you said something about, conditioned perfectionist state. I think about, particularly in theater, you get to a point where you know the show, for myself as a director, the show's gonna go up. Like, now, how is it might be wobbly as fuck, but the show is gonna go up. Do you know what I mean? And so that's gonna tend to itself. That's why the people were hired to do what they do well, if given the opportunity to do it. But what doesn't get taken care of is the space and the smell of the space, the feel of the space, and that the space has to be ripe, it has to be fertile, it has to be nutritious for equity to grow. And I've been in too many places where people think about equity in a very static way, and they don't understand it as something that happens in response to the relationships that we have. So all that all that to say is I'm oftentimes really thinking about the space before I'm even in it to inform how I show up.
Thank you. And same invitation, Akima and Tamanya. Wow.
I don't have too much to add to that. I think I do want to say this though. Nicole, I absolutely love you. I had to say that. So and this, some people may not fully understand what I mean by this, but I love the fact that you cuss. And it is, there are studies that show that people who cuss are brilliant. So I have to say that, okay? And I love the way that you embody the very essence of everything that we're doing here. Like it's just, so I just had to say that because I was like, if I sit on this too long, I'm gonna like start fidgeting and bubbling. You gotta be like, what's going on over there? Because I'm just loving listening to you talk. I forgot that I probably should say something too. So I'm like, oh yes, right. You called me. I'm like, oh. But Rachel, to your point about yesterday, my statement was space and grace. And at RSC, that's like a staple statement. We are all the epitome of the very need that we're seeking to resolve. We are all mothers, caregivers, fathers working in the industry, some of us single parents, many of us, myself, in the sandwich generation between the two. When you start to sit down and look at what our obligations are in life, it can be very hard sometimes to then translate that into, because I need this space, but now I have to do something to actively create that space. That means I need time. That means I need energy. That means I need resource, that, and the list goes on. And what I never want to do is make people feel that I am entitled to their time. I never want them to feel that yes, we make obligations, but space and grace, it's compassionate accountability. This is what you said you could do. Now you're unable to do it. How can I help us to still get over the finish line? Does it look like finding additional support? Does it look like changing the timeline? Does it look like changing what the actual objective is? What is that? Because in truth, to simply say, well, you said you were going to do it, so get it done. But what happens when it's my turn? And that's something that's always in the back of my mind, which is, I heard this years ago and it stuck with me. It said, when we do something wrong, we want justification. When something wrong is done to us, we want justice. And so I'm always thinking about that. We can reason and rationale when it's us. And so I'm always looking at it from the space of, someone is going through something and they need a moment, they need that help, they need that support. What they don't need is someone else going, figure it out, get it done, being harsh, being hard. So space and grace, it's okay, let's make the space to talk about this, to be about this. And I love what you said about Nicole, about creating the space, cultivating the space, because that's it's so much of what we talk about all the time. And sometimes it makes people sick. But we're like, no, we have to talk about this. The space is key, because then once we create that space, then grace just flows naturally next.
Yep.
Because people feel safe to say, this is what I need, and they can actually share, and then we can actually move into the next thing. So for us, it really is space and grace. It's just making the safe space to be able to talk about what is necessary and extending the grace that we would want ourselves if it were our turn. And so we just try to operate in that consistently. And it really has been a game changer. It really has. And it's even changed the way that we go about identifying who we work with and onboarding people. Like it's just changed the entire culture and nature of our makeup altogether, space and grace.
Yes to that. Yes to all of that. I came out. Oh my goodness. And I had to say, same with both. I catch myself listening, and I'm like, oh, it's my turn. So that's name of a good panel when everyone is just watching each other and just as excited to be there. So yes, again, I don't have a ton to add to that, but I think that those are huge pieces. And when I have worked with you both, I've been very lucky to have been on a panel with you before, Nicole, and work with you, Akima, both. And so like, you know, even in those moments, I remember just pulling threads and pulling pieces, and it wasn't just what we said, but it was how I was treated beforehand. I remember, Nicole, we had a conversation with Rachel and I, we were in the kitchen, and we were just like, yes, yes. And I, you know, feeling intimidated, having never met you before, like knowing how known your name was, like you just made so much space, like you are as worthy to be here as I am, and your voice is just as important as mine. So I remember that. And then Kima, I remember just saying to Rachel, because she had been saying, you have to meet Akima, you have to meet Akima. When I did, I was like, first of all, like she blew my hair back. She's one of those people that like, while you're talking, she's emailing you what you just talked about. And you're like, oh, it's all here now. It's, oh, you did it. So I always aspire to be one of those people. I'm not, but like, oh my goodness, just the like on top of it of like, this thought is now in action. It's so beautiful. But I think when I have spaces that I'm in charge of, it's a lot that I remember right before I started working with PAAL. I was working on a production, and I was carrying with me a lot of trauma from older productions. So I was like, I don't want to be that leader. Like, how am I not that leader? And I think a couple of things I carried with me, and I like that grace keeps coming up. I called it radical grace at the time, space and grace. Like, I think it's very similar. But first of all, it was that, considering like who's in the room, what do they need to be here? Like, I was working with a lot of parents intentionally. I was working with a lot of people of color intentionally. And like, I so many times I've heard like, oh, this person can't make it 9 to 5 because they have a job, so we should find someone else. And I was like, but that's so many people of color, like that's what we do. Like that's we have right. to have that other job, because I make 50 cents on the dollar for a white compared to a white man. That's a federal statistic. So like literally I had been so used to being like, those people are out, and I'm like, but those are the people I want. So like, are we rehearsing at night? Are we rehearsing on weekends? Are we being flexible? And then as Nicole, in, you know, sort of in the shape of Nicole's welcome, like when mistakes would happen, when problems would happen, my idea, my thought was always like, people would come to you. I remember I had this heartbreaking conversation with a beautiful, full-figured woman, and a woman of color. And she was like, the costume doesn't fit. I'll change. I'll lose weight. I'll do this. I'll do that. And I was just like, no, you're perfect. We will change. The costume will change. The space will change. How you are fitted will change. But you are perfect. So just carrying that with me, that we are exactly who we need to be. When we are authentic and bring our whole selves, we are exactly who we need to be. Space needs to be made for that. You know, if you were coming from here to there and you need an Uber, how do we get you the funds for that? Or if, you know, like if you were having trouble figuring out this set of lines, how can we get those run with you? Like, again, starting from we're right, how do we make the space hold that, and not how do we change ourselves? Because I think that's something I experienced a lot as a young director, of like, how can you be more plastic and change yourself and cut off pieces of yourself to fit in this space. So being the opposite of that, saying like, nope, I want you, I want all of you, I want your complaints, I want your frustration, I want to see your kid in the space, you know. Yeah, and then starting from there and working out, not the other way.
Yes, come through.
Yes, thank you. Not gonna say anything about it. Just check out the chat, and I'll throw another prompt because I'm living in this. Yes, and in those spaces, as the leader in the room, when you share out and when you care, and there's a situation even happening in the chat right now where a leader is taking the initiative to allow the person they're responsible for to care for themselves. Where do you go as a leader then to find care? Because sometimes that's where it stops. I know for me, that's a big obstacle, is I've got you, I'll cover it, great. And then I stay in that place and I forget about the care coming in. So as a prompt, like, as you give that compassion, how do you as a leader, and to whom do you look to receive compassion, or what is that experience like for the folks in this room who will be intentionally practicing the giving portion? What is the receiving portion like of compassion for a leader? Akima, I think you're on mute, but I really want to hear what you are saying.
I was just saying, that's a great question. What my answer is probably not the norm, which is fine. I mean, I go to my community, but ironically, my leadership team has kind of become my community. We have gotten to the place where we have been so vulnerable and so transparent with each other that like we're family now. And so you know, we're just checking on each other. We're like, these are the people I'm working with, like even our board members, we're just calling each other and checking in. And these are the people, you know, I'm troubleshooting. I'm trying to figure out life. It's not even just work, it's life. And I'm on the phone with these same people. So, but and again, I think that's why I said it's been such a game changer, and it's been wonderful because we have, and you will hear background noise in my background, by the way. But we have just been so connected in the process of doing this work, and then life happens in this work. So we make space for life, that then we're like doing life together too. So they are often the people that I'm talking to when, okay, you know, we have to disseminate work differently, or I'm hitting my own roadblock personally, or, you know, that's where the care has really come from. And then myself, you know, I force myself. I have ADHD, and it has been exacerbated by the pandemic. And so I have bells and whistles for everything. Like Tamanya said, like, oh, that email went out, because if I don't do it, you'll get it in 8 months. And so I know who I am. I know myself. And so for me, bells and whistles that say, take the time, make the space, check in with yourself. Like I literally have to make an appointment with myself, but I know that's what I have to do. So that's what I'm doing. And those are probably the two spaces where, you know, I find my care.
Yes, open invitation.
I also keep catching myself checking the chat. So thank you for all the beautiful, beautiful sentiments in there. That's what I keep doing. I think I can go on that one just a little bit. I think that, yes, Akima, it's knowing yourself, that I think neuroexpansiveness is something I'm working through too. And it's you have to put those systems in place, because yes, that's my gauge also. You will have it today, or you will have it in 6 months. And that is, there's not a middle ground, unfortunately. But like, as I learned that about myself and accommodate myself, I think that's one of my supports. Like, I think for a long time, I had, and Rachel talked this a little bit yesterday, it was the shoulds of like, I should be doing, I should be able, and I just need to be kind of myself and be like, that's not how my brain works. I could say shit all day long. It's not. So like caring for myself and being like, that is not in your journey. You can't do that. It's not how you work. It's not how you succeed. But also I think that being real careful with shame. We talked a little bit about this yesterday too. I will shut myself down before anyone will shut me down. Even asking for help, even reaching out and being like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm something's happening. My like yesterday, my little one was sick, and I found out right before the first session, like 7 minutes before. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And the temptation is to hide it, is to be like, it's fine, everything's fine, I'm fine. And I literally, with everyone on the call, was like, this is what's happening. I'm sorry. You know, not I'm sorry, but I'm sorry if I have to get off. But like, you know, feeling that, seeking that care, I think like it's first the button I have to push in myself. That like, again, to say to myself what I say to other people. Like I always say that, I'm like, imagine you're talking to someone else who has a sick kid. Would you be like, hide it, put on some makeup, forget about it? Or would you be like, no, what, like, tell me, like, I'm here for, and that's always, I think, the leadership that PAAL has offered, which is like, be transparent, bring everything, tell us what's going on. And the redundancy allows it that, like, if I hadn't been able to make it tomorrow, there were 4 other amazing people who could have run that space. So I think that's what care looks like planning ahead, because someone will have a thing happen. And like Hima was saying, we know each other's kids, we know each other's lives, like, know that that happens and that's okay. I know Rachel and I presented together, we're like 1 minute before we've had a medical emergency, and like one of us had to be like, I'm having maybe an ER situation. I will go and come right back if everything's okay. So I think that redundancy, but also like, again, pretending I'm talking to someone else, pretending I'm because I'm so hard on myself. Like just being like, if the situation was flipped, if this is happening to Akima, Rachel, or Nicole, or Adriana, or Garlia, how would I speak to them? And then just being real brave with the response of like, whatever I get back is probably going to be amazing. I just have to get over that fear hump of like, nothing bad has ever happened in the PAAL space or in this, these beautiful spaces that are built, but like knowing that fear is there and just really not letting it stop me. Like that's always hard. That's always really hard. And then I think speaking things into the space too. Like I didn't want to talk about being neuroexpensive for a really long time because again, it felt like people would judge or people would say right off the bat, you can't do this. And just talking about like being a disabled person, being it's a gift. It's magic. It makes me work differently. I'm great in a crisis. I can come up with 1,000 ideas. Do I need help with follow through? Yes. Do I need to be reminded? Yes. Do I need 7 gentle emails from Rachel that are like, here's the offer of, if we can't do this thing, maybe we can do this thing. Yes. But like, what did I say the other day, Rachel? We're magical unicorns. Like, let's just remember that and start from there. And whatever we can do, great. And whatever we can't do, also great. So thank you.
I just have to like return the love. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Like I can't write fast enough to capture the wisdom. And then Rachel, I'm so grateful for you like putting it in the chat because I'm copying and pasting it into an email thread. I just love quotes. And I love having people's words be in my home that I can see every day and have those words shape something that I'm experiencing. So Tamanya and Akima, I'm very like grateful for you both. Thank you. I think my response to this question is one that is challenging because I'm a dark-skinned, tall, fat, Black woman, and anti-Blackness is real. And so what I'm having to say to people, and I'm saying it as if I'm just starting this practice, but I've been doing this for a few years, is naming those parts of my identity that I know are going to cause some shenanigans later in how we are activated around each other. And so I also like tell people in the beginning, this is not me replicating Atlas, particularly as a director, right? Like I am not holding, I hope I have the reference right. I'm not holding the world up. I'm not building a world for you to be your best, authentic, whole self in, and I'm outside of that world to be mistreated and abused and the trash bin for, the leftovers of the stuff that we don't want in our utopia. But that is often what people think. And I know that to be true because it's happening in their actions. And so as a director, I am constantly thinking about what are those systems of support, particularly if I've been pulled out of my community to go direct in a city that I am not from, right? Of like, how do I keep my footing? And it's difficult. I will say that, like, it's just like very, very difficult. What I am trying to do is gaslight myself less. I'm trying to remind myself something that Carmen Morgan said about like all critiques aren't equal. And so when I'm receiving some feedback or critique from someone who I feel like, your analysis isn't where it needs to be for you to be trying to give this feedback to me in this moment, that is also very much couched in my oppression or you remaining in a dominant situation over me or an abusive situation over me. So anyway, I kind of feel like I'm going off in a million different directions, but I will just say that it's a constant battle to find that gentle grace, that radical grace, that care, that love, that empathy, and to have it be like there in a deep way. I think in the beginning, everyone is like, we're so glad you're here. And then when I start to speak that truth, it's like, we're so glad you're here. And then it becomes, you're here. Right? So just trying to get to a place where I know that I can thrive in spaces that I know weren't built for me and I know are simply engaged in an act of tolerating my presence. So yeah, anyway, I'm gonna stop before I start leaking all over the place. Y'all know I'm forever crying.
This is a leak welcome space. Always. And this is so key. And this is real. And I just want to affirm everything that you shared. It was a huge yes. And thank you to all three of you for your transparency and generosity in those answers. And speaking on behalf of this space, we uphold it, we affirm it. I want to also honor a principle that comes up when we talk about advocacy in the PAAL space, where in this space, at times we can talk about the safety of the space. And then the answer changes when we talk about being outside of those safe spaces. So that's what we're hearing too, I feel, is that there are two answers. When I'm in a safe space, I can seek out my community, check in, be transparent. That's wonderful. And then Nicole provided really vital truths in terms of identifying when spaces are not safe. No one has to die on that sword of this space is my responsibility if that space is not your responsibility. Care can be shown as a leader through example and through caring for yourself, like Nicole was talking about. And I just really want to lift up that part, Nicole, because that is so important. As caregivers, sometimes I think we take on all spaces. And as all cities are not created equal, all spaces are not created equal either. And so the strategy of care and compassion, the tactic of care and compassion, the depth and expanse of care and compassion, you may feel fluctuate, and it is not speaking to your capabilities. It could very much be speaking to the availability of that space for what you're sending out. So if what you're sending out is not coming back, send some to yourself is what I would offer. Amazing. Thank you. And on that note, I would love to, we started talking a bit about it in practice as a director, when you go out of town, in the room, costume design. And I know that, for many folks, there are producers and their executive directors, like going into spaces where we don't have full agency. What is language that you use to give people agency working with you, and or that you speak into a space with leadership that has not bought into this idea of compassion yet? One of the phrases that I find, like in dire situations, is that's not helpful. And I leave it there. So like, just as a prompt, like I really feel like they're responsible for unhelpful language. And so I'm just going to name it and put it back into the room. And that has worked for PAAL when we go into other spaces and we share about caregiving needs as essential for access. And we receive back, no, we're okay because we have a lactation space. I get to respond back with, that's not helpful. And then I can choose to explain why, or I can choose to save my energy, depending on the space. So as an offer, I want us all to know that our reactions to shame and holding it in and feeling fatigue, that can be a condition of punishment or fear, and unsafe spaces that are real. It's not all coming from, invisible pressure. So sometimes having some language that we can practice, like that's not helpful, can help us navigate out of a situation that's meant for our harm and take us to some healing, hopefully. So just as a prompt in the space, have there been phrases that have come to you that are useful in ensuring that, you know, even for yourself, you can name what the situation is and navigate with compassion? Feel free to share in the chat too, anyone listening. This is an open prompt as we near inviting you to speak into the space too.
Two things I always find helpful are, I think, just playing off of that, Rachel, naming the harm, like saying it right out loud. Like I remember I was at a photo shoot and a male photographer was trying to do something that 3 actresses did not feel was comfortable. And I was like, as a male photographer, I'm not going to let you cross that boundary because they are in charge of their bodies and they have agency and they may be going things you don't understand. So we're just going to stop right there. So I think sometimes naming the power dynamic is really helpful, or, you know, as someone who experienced a different level of privilege than I have, you may see it that way, but my experience has not been that. And documentation. I feel like people behave a lot differently when they know you're documenting, and that comes from my mother, who worked in HR for many, many years and who is on this call. But it's when you say, I'm going to take notes and send them to you after this meeting, and not asking permission, not saying is it okay, but just that's what I'm doing. I feel like people sit up a little straighter and sometimes realize there will be other eyes on their behavior, because they are treating me differently than they would treat someone else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna tell you, Rachel, you threw me because you threw compassionate in at the end. And sometimes I just be like, what the fuck? Or I roll my eyes. And so now I feel like, you know, I don't know how compassionate.
No, keep going, because that was actually like a plot setup for the next connect. So actually just say whatever came to your mind before that word, because
I'm so glad you said that.
Spoiler, I'm going to connect why that's compassionate in my POV anyway. So delete, remove, add to the end. I've edited. What phrase would you say in the moment to help yourself navigate out of harm and into a more healing space, period?
That's why I was so quiet. I was over here like, well, I don't know how to answer this. So
Edit
I will
prompt. Edit.
Wait.
Yes. Reclaim
Nicole,
it.
I would love for you to finish your thought.
That was the thought. I am known for dropping a fuck here and there. Okay. So I'll just be like, what the fuck? And then, you know, sometimes it is an eye roll. And to the point, you know, Tamanya and of Rachel, if you like talking about naming those power dynamics, one of my like drop phrases or key phrases that I go to is, are you asking me, a 1099 contract employee, to subsidize, and then I know whatever their annual operating budget is, so then I'll fill in the blank with that thing, right? So you're asking me, 1099 contracted worker, to subsidize your $10 million annual operating budget for childcare needs, for a per diem for food, for a travel stipend that you would have given me if I was an out-of-town artist? Is that what you're asking me? And then I'll, you know, same thing, I'll put it in writing. Yes, for your mom who's HR, I am like, went to a historic Black college, and you better have had that stuff written down to prove whatever it was that you're saying. And I found it very useful in terms of white supremacy.
Yes.
To have that documentation used against them, or as an analysis of their patterns of behavior that they are not able to call a pattern. You know, so I think like all of that is important, but I'm not above an eye roll, and I'm not above flat out asking someone, something that I feel like returns the shame that they are heaping on me back to them, right? It is not my shame to carry, is what a beloved once told me. And I keep that very dear to my heart, so I can check. I already got enough bags with my babies. And just, I love this, Ikema, like we're doing life together. I got enough. So I don't want to have to hold on to anybody else's nonsense or foolishness.
I love that you said that, because that's we're in the same space. And what's interesting now that you say that, when you said that you went to an HBCU, so did I. And I wonder if that's something that is just inherently taught, because my immediate go-to is, I'm going to reframe what you just said to me as a question to make sure, one, that I did understand it, and you also hear the foolishness in what you just said. But then two, I like to, when I put it in writing, I also like to let them know that, whatever the other stakeholders are that are involved, I'm going to be taking those notes and sharing that out. And then let's have a follow-up meeting an X period amount of time with all of us at the table. And I will say this, when I know, especially when I know I'm going into an unsafe space, and I'll actually backtrack this a little bit because I'm going to be very transparent and honest here. Mm-hmm. As a Black woman, I am always concerned that there's likely the space is not going to be safe. Mm-hmm. So it's already in my mind before I enter that space, so that there's that uncertainty. So I am always going in looking at not necessarily armor, but protection. How can I fortify myself in this space? How can I ensure that if this goes left, I can say, okay, let's go ahead and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and reclaim some of that power in this space. And so I'm always going into a space beforehand, looking at who are the people who believe in me and believe in this and want to see this come together equitably and fairly. Who are those people? And letting those people know and getting it on their radar that I'm about to go into said space, because then when it goes left, I can say, okay, well, just so you know, I think it would be great to have so-and-so that I just talked to who would love to do this, who I know. And usually I try to find someone who is either their peer or above them, so that now there is a level of accountability there. So you can treat me a certain kind of way, or you thought you could, but now let's go ahead and look at, you're not going to do the same thing to someone else, to this person here. So let's have a conversation with them. Let's bring them into this. I've already let them know I was coming, so they're aware. So why don't we circle back in 2-3 weeks, have a meeting, let them because I've already come in with, this is possible. And then when it does, it's just that, all right, great, let's do that instead. And it's, how do you consistently ensure your safety? Like, I guess that's the compassionate component of it. I'm being compassionate to myself. It's how can I ensure my safety when I'm walking into an unsafe space? And unfortunately, the presumption is often this is probably going to be an unsafe space, especially in the nature of this industry where we are talking about, predominantly, white male dominated, older white male dominated spaces. There is a question in the chat. Akima, how do you relate that to extra labor? Oh, so I'm actually gonna quote Tamanya on this one. Pay us. That's how I relate that to extra. But it's whatever the question, if I'm being asked to do extra labor, the question then becomes reframed in the sense of, am I understanding that you're wanting me to do this, and that? Like, it's asking the question is, am I understanding? Because I am, but it's, am I understanding that you're wanting me to do X number of hours of labor with no overtime or no, and so it's getting them to hear it, but then also saying, okay, this is what we know. So for instance, I'll liken it to the film industry, particularly because a lot of people want to say, oh, it's a standard 12-hour day and then you're working 16 hours, they didn't pay overtime, all that good stuff. There are organizations similar to RFC. There are union committees. So I try to know who those folks are so that when I am going into those rooms or into those spaces to talk on behalf of other people, though it's the same sort of tactic. I'm referencing those folks. Specifically the extra labor for that preparation. It depends. If I'm working on spec, meaning I'm going in to pitch something, I just attribute that to my personal safety. If it's something that I'm having to do because I know that space is unsafe, I will tack it onto equity planning out.
That's right.
It's because it's work that I had to do for you to be able to get to the place that you said you wanted to be. And you don't really want to be there apparently because you wouldn't have just done this. So that means I have to do extra work. You're going to have to pay for that. Yeah, that's no. Awesome, Susie. Thank you. And I hope I answered your question. I hope that was clear, Catherine, as well.
Something that's already happening in the chat that I'm going to say a few things, give you time to warm up your fingers and minds and hearts. But we're going to start in a little bit to invite questions into the chat, and or if it's more supportive for you to put up the hand emoji, etc. Processing all of this language, the incredible resource and opportunity of these leaders in this space, I really encourage you to offer your questions and get some of these incredible responses. And re-colon your answers. They are beyond what was wanted and what was sought after, even with the word compassion. And this was the spoiler, and I was like, I dropped it early. I dropped the word early. I edit myself. I reframe, because I would love to offer that, at least in the PAAL space, we have a very specific definition for compassion, and it is never the word nice. So a compassionate response may not always feel nice or comfortable. And there's a very specific characteristic, usually, of when it does not feel warm and nice and comfortable. And in our compassion training, when we talk about how do you know when to say what, and like when to, like what direction your compassionate action goes, I want to do the right thing. And it's when we say, I am going to show this space and grace to the people I'm responsible for. You all heard these leaders very fastly go there. And then I'm going to speak truth to power. And the reason it flips there in the power dynamic, depending on where you live in that space, is because we define compassion as where empathy meets education. When your understanding of what's happening to people in the space meets your knowledge of what should be happening in the space, you're going to care for the people you're responsible for, and you're going to find the language to speak truth to power when it's the right moment, when it's the right space, when you feel like you are equipped with the tools. And you all offered that naturally through this entire session. You became warm when you were responsible for it, and you became very honest and truthful and truth speaking when the context was about power. So I invite that. And for both of you, Nicole and Akima and Tamanya, again, this space and beyond, in all PAAL spaces and in every space I occupy, and invite all of our attendees whenever we occupy, that we affirm your experiences, that we acknowledge that the cost of compassion is not the same for everyone. And so a prompt I also would like to offer everyone, in addition to how do I name myself, is how do I make this space safe for compassion? If it has all those words, transparency, generosity, truth to power, changing the production, changing the timeline. If I said these phrases outside of the space, guarantee at least 99% of us, our hearts would start racing. We would have adrenaline spikes. We would start to be afraid of a punishing figure. It is an offer to say compassion can come with a cost. So how do we make spaces safe for compassion? I just offer that to the room. And I'd also love to invite any questions that folks may have for these incredible leaders. And I will never run out of questions, so it's okay if you don't have them. But an invitation, any hands. And Adriana, I appreciate your help with anyone that you see. You would also in the space love to share in the chat a new way to name yourself, or a way you've learned to make the space safe for compassion. I would love to hear that in the chat. That's also going to be my prompt for the speakers. What does it mean to make a space safe for compassion? And it could be, how would someone make the space safe for you? I want to offer that to the leaders on this call.
I have to go back to the brilliance of Akima and putting when I spoke at an RFC event. I was on a panel with a brilliant intimacy coordinator named Chelsea Morgan, and I actually ended up taking a class with them later. And something they said was, and this is something I try to keep in my heart, is that no space is ever truly safe because we don't know what people are bringing into it. But that safety is a, and I'm going to put, before I forget, because of my new expenses, I'm going to put their link right here. Please, everyone, go visit them and hire them. But it is an active commitment from the entire community, each day, each moment, to be moving toward a safer space. So to be acknowledging what is in the room, who is in the room, to be educating ourselves, to be asking those big questions, to be preparing things in advance. So I think that's something I try to carry with me, that it's a commitment from everyone, and it's an ongoing commitment. You don't write like your community agreements and that's it, we're done. It's a check-in. Do these still fit? What are we missing? What's different today? And then realizing that when things are not safe, that that's not a failure, that's feedback. That's like for our, for us to solve. It's not a place to stop trying. It's a place to keep going. And again, always thank you, Akima, for putting me on that panel. That was exciting.
It was an honor to have you, honestly. And yes, Chels was incredible. Just that, yes.
Thank you, Tamanya. We do have a question in the chat. And welcome everyone on the panel to answer these questions. It doesn't have to be a single person, but that was beautiful, Tamanya. Thank you. The question is for an individual working for an institution in fundraising. PAAL has very strong opinions about this next part. I'm expected to be at the theater on certain evenings, but find it challenging to take on too many evenings because then I have to pay for childcare. I'm a divorced parent, sharing childcare, but responsible for weeknights and morning school drop-off. As we're moving into this Q&A session, if you would like to join us for the panels, feel free to get a ticket for the summit, but I'm going to invite us to stop the stream because we're about to deep dive some very important stuff. So thank you all so much, and we'll wait for the stream to close before we share some